The gunshot that killed Helena Harper's father echoed across the Rocky Mountains on a Tuesday morning in June of 1872. And by Thursday, she found herself staring at a man so broad-shouldered, he blocked out the sun coming through her cabin door. Quinn Patterson stood there with his hat in his massive hands, his long dark hair tied back with a leather cord, and muscles that strained against his shirt as he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He looked uncomfortable, which seemed impossible for a man who spent his life surviving alone in the wilderness. "Miss Harper," he said, his voice rough like gravel underfoot, "I heard about your father. I am sorry for your loss." Helena pressed her handkerchief to her eyes, though the tears had mostly stopped by now. At 22 years old, she had thought she would have more time before facing the world alone. Her father had been everything to her since her mother died giving birth to a stillborn son when Helena was just 10. Now she stood in their small cabin outside of what passed for civilization in the Colorado Territory, wondering what came next. "Thank you, Mr. Patterson," she managed to say. "That is kind of you to come all this way." Quinn stepped inside, ducking his head beneath the doorframe. He was even larger than she remembered from the few times she had seen him in town, trading pelts and supplies. The mountain men who lived in these parts were known for their independence and strength, but Quinn Patterson had a reputation that exceeded most. They said he had killed a grizzly bear with nothing but a knife. They said he could track anything across any terrain. They said he preferred the company of the mountains to people, which made his presence in her cabin all the more surprising. "Your father was a good man," Quinn said. "He helped me once when I took sick with fever 3 winters back, brought me medicine and supplies. I never forgot that kindness." Helena nodded, fresh tears threatening to spill. Her father had been like that, always helping where he could despite their own meager means. They had come west from Pennsylvania in 1865, right after the war ended, hoping to find gold and instead finding only hard work and harder winters. But her father had been happy here in a way he never was back east, and she had learned to love these mountains too, even if they were unforgiving. "He mentioned you," she said quietly. "He said you were a good man who just wanted to be left alone." Something flickered across Quinn's face, an emotion she could not quite read. "I suppose that is true enough." He turned his hat in his hands. "Miss Harper, I know this is not my place, but what will you do now? This cabin is isolated. Winter will come again. It is not safe for a woman alone out here." The question had been haunting Helena since the moment the sheriff rode away after taking her statement. Her father had been shot by a drifter trying to rob them, though they had nothing worth stealing. The sheriff caught the man and he would hang for it, but that did not bring her father back or solve her immediate problem. She had no family, no husband, no prospects. The cabin was paid for, but she would need money for supplies, for ammunition to hunt, for seeds to plant. She knew how to shoot and how to survive. Her father had made sure of that, but Quinn was right. The isolation that had seemed romantic when she had her father now felt suffocating and dangerous. "I do not know," she admitted. "I have been trying to figure that out." Quinn was quiet for a long moment, studying her with eyes the color of pine trees. Finally, he spoke, and what he said surprised her more than his arrival had. "Your father told me something once when I was sick and talking out of my head with the fever. He said his greatest regret was that you had never seen the ocean. He said your mother had told him stories about growing up near the Atlantic, and he had always meant to take you there but never did. He said you dreamed about it." Helena felt her breath catch. It was true. Her mother had filled her childhood with tales of the sea, of waves that rolled in with the persistence of time itself, of salt spray and endless horizons. After her mother died, Those stories had become even more precious, and Helena had spent countless nights imagining what it would be like to stand before something so vast and powerful. But as the years passed and life grew harder, the dream had seemed more and more impossible. "He told you that?" She whispered. "He did." Quinn met her eyes directly. "Miss Harper, I have a proposition for you. Let me take you to see the ocean. It is a long journey, maybe 2 months there and back. We would go to California, to the Pacific. I know the way. I know how to keep us safe. And when we return, if you still want to stay in this cabin, I will help you prepare for winter. But if you decide you want to start somewhere new, I will help you do that too. Your father did right by me when I needed it. Let me do right by you." The offer was so unexpected, so generous, that Helena could not immediately find words. She looked at this mountain man, this near stranger, and tried to understand why he would make such a proposal. 2 months on the trail would be dangerous and difficult. He owed her nothing beyond the condolence visit he had already made. "Why?" she asked simply. Quinn's jaw tightened, and she saw something vulnerable flash across his rugged features. "Because I know what it is like to have dreams die, Miss Harper, and because your father's kindness saved my life. This is a debt I can never fully repay, but I can try. You should see the ocean. You deserve that much." Helena walked to the window and looked out at the mountains that had been her home for 7 years. They were beautiful and terrible, and suddenly she knew she could not stay here alone, could not watch another winter descend on this cabin where her father's absence would haunt every corner. Maybe it was reckless. Maybe it was improper for an unmarried woman to travel alone with an unmarried man. But propriety seemed like a luxury she could no longer afford, and something in Quinn's steady gaze told her she could trust him. "Yes," she said, turning back to face him. "Yes, I want to see the ocean." The relief that washed over Quinn's face was unmistakable. "We will leave in 3 days. That will give you time to settle your affairs and pack what you need. Travel light. Bring sturdy clothes and good boots. I will handle everything else." Those 3 days passed in a blur. Helena sold what she could and gave away the rest to the few neighbors within riding distance. She packed 2 changes of clothes, her mother's silver locket, her father's journal, and a small bundle of letters her parents had written to each other during their courtship. Everything she owned in the world fit into a single leather satchel. The cabin she left locked but not sold. Some part of her wanted to keep that option open, though she suspected she would never return. Quinn arrived before dawn on the 4th day with 2 horses, a pack mule, and enough supplies for an army. He had clearly planned carefully, and Helena felt a rush of gratitude for his competence. She had slept little the night before, anxiety and excitement warring in her chest. She was leaving everything she knew to chase a dream with a man she barely knew. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt more alive than she had in months. "Ready?" Quinn asked as she emerged from the cabin for the last time. "Ready," Helena confirmed. He helped her onto her horse, his hands gentle despite their size and obvious strength. She noticed he was careful not to touch her longer than necessary, maintaining a respectful distance even as he checked her stirrups and made sure she was comfortable. They rode out as the sun crested the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The first days of travel established a rhythm between them. Quinn was not talkative by nature, but he was patient in teaching her the things she needed to know about long-distance trail riding. He showed her how to preserve her energy, how to spot good places to make camp, how to read the weather in the shape of clouds. At night, they maintained separate camps a respectful distance apart, and Quinn always made sure she had privacy to attend to her needs. Helena found herself studying him when he was not looking. Quinn moved through the wilderness with the confidence of a man completely at home in it. His body was a testament to the hard life he led, all muscle and strength earned through survival rather than vanity. His face was weathered but handsome, with a strong jaw often covered in stubble and eyes that seemed to see everything. She noticed the way he constantly scanned their surroundings, always alert for danger. She noticed the gentleness in his hands when he tended the horses. She noticed the small kindnesses he showed her, like always making sure she had the warmest spot by the fire and the choicest pieces of meat from whatever he hunted. By the end of the first week, she felt comfortable enough to ask him about himself. "How long have you been living in the mountains?" she asked one evening as they sat by the fire, the stars brilliant overhead. Quinn poked at the flames with a stick, considering his answer. 8 years now, came out here after the war. You fought. I did. Union Army, saw things I would rather forget. His voice was flat, matter of fact. When it ended, I could not go back to regular life. The noise of towns, the expectations, the pretending everything was normal. The mountains offered silence and solitude. That was what I needed. Helena understood in a way. Her own father had been changed by the war, though he had been too old to fight. He had lost friends, had seen the country tear itself apart. Coming west had been his way of finding peace too. "You ever get lonely?" she asked. Quinn looked at her then, really looked at her, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks under the intensity of his gaze. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But lonely is better than being around people and still feeling alone." The honesty in his words touched something deep in Helena's chest. She had felt that way after her mother died, surrounded by her father's well-meaning attempts at comfort, but feeling isolated in her grief. She suspected Quinn understood loss in a way most people did not. As they traveled west, the landscape began to change. The high peaks of the Rockies gave way to plateaus and high desert. They skirted south of Wyoming territory and crossed into Utah territory, where the mountains rose again in different formations. Quinn proved to be exactly what he had promised, a competent guide who kept them safe and on course. He hunted for their food, always securing fresh meat. He found water sources that seemed invisible to Helena's untrained eyes. He set a pace that was challenging but not exhausting, making good time without wearing them down. They had been traveling for 3 weeks when they encountered their first real trouble. A group of 5 men, rough-looking and armed, blocked the trail ahead. Quinn immediately positioned his horse between Helena and the strangers, his hand moving to the rifle strapped to his saddle. "Gentlemen," Quinn said, his voice calm but hard, "we do not want any trouble. We are just passing through." The leader of the group, a man with a scarred face and cruel eyes, grinned. "Now, that is too bad, friend, because we are in a mood for trouble. That is a mighty fine pack mule you have got there, and a mighty fine woman." Helena felt fear spike through her, but Quinn's posture did not change. If anything, he seemed to grow larger, more imposing. The muscles in his shoulders tensed beneath his shirt, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "You are going to want to move along," Quinn said quietly. "I will not ask twice." The scarred man laughed, but it died when Quinn moved faster than seemed possible for a man his size. His rifle was up and aimed in a heartbeat, and the click of the hammer being cocked echoed in the sudden silence. "I have killed men for less than looking at a woman the way you just did," Quinn said, and there was no bluff in his voice, only cold certainty. "I spent 4 years in a war learning how to kill. I can put a bullet through your eye from 100 yards. From this distance, I cannot miss. And if your friends there are thinking about drawing, know that I will take at least 3 of you down before you can blink. So ask yourself, is it worth dying today?" The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Helena held her breath, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. But something in Quinn's absolute stillness, in the deadly promise in his eyes, must have convinced the scarred man that he was serious. Slowly, the leader raised his hands in mock surrender. "Easy, friend. We were just having a little fun. No harm meant." "Move," Quinn said. The group moved off the trail, and Quinn kept his rifle trained on them as he and Helena rode past. He did not lower the weapon until they were well out of sight, and even then he kept scanning behind them for the next hour. "Are you all right?" he asked Helena when they finally stopped. She realized she was shaking. "Yes, thank you, that was frightening." Quinn's expression softened. "I am sorry you had to see that, but men like that only understand strength. Showing weakness would have been dangerous for both of us. You would really have shot them," without hesitation. He met her eyes. "I will keep you safe, Helena. That is a promise." It was the first time he had used her given name, and something shifted between them in that moment. The formality that had existed gave way to something warmer, more personal. That night, they made camp close together, and Helena found comfort in Quinn's presence nearby. As June turned to July, they crossed into Nevada territory. The heat intensified, and water became scarcer. Quinn rationed their supplies carefully, and they traveled in the early mornings and evenings, resting during the hottest parts of the day. Helena had never experienced heat like this, and she marveled at how different it was from the mountains. Everything was dust and sage and endless sky. They talked more as the days passed. Helena told Quinn about her childhood in Pennsylvania, about her mother's stories of the sea, about her father's dreams of striking gold that never materialized. Quinn told her about growing up on a farm in Ohio, about the brother he lost at Antietam, about the quiet beauty he found in animal tracks, and the way snow fell through pine trees. They were both people who had known loss, who had learned to carry grief like a second skin. That shared understanding created a bond between them that went beyond mere traveling companionship. One evening, as they camped near a small stream, Helena watched Quinn wash in the water, his shirt removed. The fading sunlight illuminated the scars that crisscrossed his back and shoulders, testament to battles survived. But what struck her most was the sheer power in his frame, the way his muscles moved beneath his skin as he cupped water in his hands. He was magnificent in a raw, primal way, like the mountains themselves had shaped him into something elemental and enduring. He caught her looking and paused, water dripping from his hair. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Helena quickly looked away, embarrassed at being caught staring. But when she glanced back, she saw something in Quinn's eyes she had not seen before. Awareness, attraction, the recognition that something was growing between them that had nothing to do with debts owed or promises made. That night, as Helena lay in her bedroll staring at the stars, she acknowledged what her heart had been trying to tell her for days. She was falling in love with Quinn Patterson. It was improbable, maybe even foolish. They came from different worlds, wanted different things. But she could not deny the way her pulse quickened when he smiled at her, the way she felt safe and seen in his presence, the way she had started to imagine a future that included those quiet, watchful eyes. They reached the Sierra Nevada mountains in mid-July. The climb was arduous, the trails narrow and treacherous. Quinn led them carefully, always alert for loose rock or dangerous drops. Several times he dismounted to lead the horses himself through particularly difficult passages, and Helena watched in admiration as he navigated terrain that would have defeated most men. "How much farther?" she asked one morning as they crested another ridge. Quinn pointed west. "See that? We are close now. 2 more days, maybe 3, and we will be in California proper, then another week to the coast." Helena felt anticipation bubble up in her chest. After 6 weeks of travel, countless miles, and more hardship than she had imagined, She was almost there. The ocean was within reach. But that night, their luck ran out. A sudden summer storm rolled in with violence and fury, lightning splitting the sky and rain falling in sheets. They took shelter in a shallow cave, huddling together as the storm raged. The horses whinnied nervously, and the pack mule brayed in distress. Quinn built a small fire near the mouth of the cave, somehow coaxing flames from damp wood through sheer determination. "I am sorry," he said, sitting beside Helena. "I should have seen this coming. How could you? The sky was clear an hour ago. Mountain storms come fast. I should have known better." Helena looked at him, at the concern etched in his features, and realized he blamed himself for every discomfort she experienced. "Quinn, you have been perfect. You have kept me safe and fed and on course. One storm is not your fault." He met her eyes, and in the flickering firelight, she saw vulnerability there. "I just want this to be worth it. I want you to see the ocean and feel like it was worth all of this." "It already is," Helena said softly. "This journey being out here, seeing all these places I never would have seen. And having you with me, it is already worth it." Something changed in Quinn's expression. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he reached up and brushed a strand of damp hair from her face. His fingers were calloused and rough, but his touch was impossibly gentle. "Helena," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "This journey taking you to the ocean, it started as a debt owed, a way to honor your father's kindness, but somewhere along the way it became something else. You became something else." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since the moment I saw you in that cabin, trying so hard to be brave. I know I have no right. I am just a mountain man with nothing to offer but strong hands and a stubborn heart, but I needed you to know." Helena's breath caught. Hearing him say the words she had been feeling made everything real in a way that thrilled and terrified her. "Quinn, I am falling in love with you too. I did not expect it. I did not plan for it. But somewhere between Colorado and here, you became the person I think about when I wake up and before I sleep. You became home." The kiss, when it came, was inevitable and perfect. Quinn pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like she was something precious and breakable. His lips were gentle at first, questioning, then more insistent as Helena responded with equal passion. She felt the strength in his body, the barely restrained power, and knew he would never hurt her. This man who could kill without hesitation was holding her like she was made of glass. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn pressed his forehead to hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "When we get to the coast, when you have seen the ocean, I want to marry you, if you will have me. I know I am rough and uneducated. I know I am more comfortable with trees than people, but I will spend every day of my life making you happy if you give me the chance." Tears spilled down Helena's cheeks, but they were happy tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." They held each other as the storm raged outside. Two people who had found each other in the vast wilderness, who had somehow turned a journey of grief into a journey of love. The next 3 days passed in a haze of happiness. Everything seemed brighter, more vivid. Quinn smiled more, the sternness in his face softening whenever he looked at Helena. They rode closer together, hands occasionally brushing, stealing kisses when they stopped to rest. Helena felt like she was living in a dream, like any moment she might wake up and find herself back in that lonely cabin. They descended the western side of the Sierra Nevada and entered the rolling hills of California. The landscape was golden and dry, so different from the green mountains of Colorado. They passed through small settlements and ranches, getting closer to the coast with each passing mile. On the evening of July 23, 1872, They crested a final hill and Helena smelled it. Salt and brine and something wild she could not name. Quinn reined in his horse and pointed ahead. "There," he said simply. Helena looked, and her breath left her body in a rush. The Pacific Ocean stretched before her, vast and blue and endless. Waves rolled in with rhythmic grace, catching the light of the setting sun and turning gold and orange and pink. The sound of them, the constant susurration of water meeting land, filled the air like music. "Oh," Helena breathed. "Oh, Quinn." He helped her down from her horse, and together they walked down to the beach. Helena's boots sank into sand that was nothing like the dirt and rock she had known her whole life. She walked to the water's edge, and when the first wave rolled in and touched her feet, she laughed with pure joy. It was cold and alive, and it pulled at her like it wanted to draw her out into its depths. Quinn stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on the top of her head. "Is it everything you hoped?" he asked. "It is more," Helena said, tears streaming down her face. "So much more. Thank you for bringing me here." They stayed on the beach as the sun set, watching the waves and holding each other. Helena felt her mother's presence somehow, like her stories had brought her to this place. She felt her father's love, the dream he had always wanted to give her realized at last. And she felt Quinn's strength and devotion, this unexpected man who had changed her life completely. They camped that night on the beach, falling asleep to the sound of waves. In the morning, they rode to the nearest town, a small settlement called Monterey. They found a church and a minister who agreed to marry them that very day. Helena wore the cleanest dress she had, and Quinn slicked back his long hair and tried to look respectable, though his rugged nature could not be entirely tamed. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Quinn's voice shook as he said his vows, promising to love and protect Helena for all his days. Helena promised to stand beside him, to share in his joys and sorrows, to build a life together. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed her with such tenderness that Helena felt her heart might burst. They spent their wedding night in a small hotel, the first real bed either had slept in for 2 months. Quinn was gentle and patient, taking his time learning Helena's body, showing her pleasure she had never imagined. Afterward, they lay tangled together, listening to the distant sound of the ocean. "What happens now?" Helena asked, tracing patterns on Quinn's broad chest. "Now we decide where home is," Quinn said. "We can go back to Colorado if you want, or we can stay here in California, or we can go anywhere else. I do not care where we are as long as we are together." Helena considered this. The cabin in Colorado held too many memories, too much grief. California was beautiful but foreign. Then she thought about what she really wanted. "I want to find a place that is ours," she said. "Not too remote but not too crowded. Somewhere with land to farm and forests to hunt. Somewhere we can build a life." Quinn kissed her forehead. "Then that is what we will do." They stayed in Monterey for a week, enjoying the luxury of rest and regular meals. Quinn used some of his savings to buy supplies and new clothes for both of them. They walked the beach every day, and Helena never tired of watching the waves. But eventually, they knew it was time to start their new life. They headed inland, following a river valley into the coastal mountains. The land here was different from the Rockies, greener and gentler. They passed through areas being settled by ranchers and farmers, but Quinn kept looking for something specific. Finally, in mid-August, they found it. A valley nestled between forested hills, with a clear stream running through it and good soil visible even to Helena's untrained eyes. There was no one around for miles, but it was not as isolated as Quinn's old mountain territory. Game trails crisscrossed the area, and fruit trees grew wild along the stream. "This," Quinn said with certainty. "This is perfect." They filed a claim in the nearest land office and began building immediately. Quinn felled trees and shaped them into logs for a cabin. Helena cleared land for a garden and gathered stones for a fireplace. They worked from sunrise to sunset, their bodies falling into bed exhausted each night. But it was good work, purposeful work. They were building something together, creating a home from nothing but will and effort. By September, the cabin had walls and a roof. By October, they had a garden producing vegetables and a small chicken coop. By November, Quinn had hunted and cured enough meat to see them through the winter. They were not rich, but they had enough. Their first winter together was cold but wonderful. Snowstorms kept them inside for days at a time, and they learned each other's rhythms and preferences. Quinn taught Helena to read animal tracks in the snow. Helena taught Quinn to read books, something he had never learned properly as a child. They made love by firelight and told each other their dreams. Quinn revealed he wanted a family, children to fill the cabin with noise and life. Helena admitted she wanted that too, wanted to give children the loving home she had known before her mother died. In March of 1873, Helena realized she was pregnant. Quinn's reaction was pure joy, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around despite her protests that he would hurt the baby. He became even more protective, insisting she rest and let him handle the heavy work. Helena found it endearing and occasionally frustrating, but she understood it came from love. Their daughter was born in November of 1873, a healthy baby girl with Quinn's dark hair and Helena's green eyes. They named her Rose, and Quinn wept when he held her for the first time, this massive mountain man reduced to tears by a tiny infant. "She is perfect," he whispered, "just like her mother." Parenthood brought new challenges and joys. Quinn proved to be a devoted father, patient and gentle with Rose. Helena watched him make toys from wood and sing lullabies in his rough voice, and fell even more in love with him. Their cabin rang with laughter and baby noises, and the silence Quinn had once craved was replaced with the happy chaos of family. In the spring of 1874, a few other families settled within a day's ride of their valley. Quinn was wary at first, his old instincts for solitude rising up. But Helena encouraged him to be neighborly, and slowly Quinn formed friendships with the other men. They helped each other with harvests and barn raisings, and the women visited each other for company. A real community was forming. In 1876, Helena gave birth to their second child, a son they named Thomas after Quinn's brother who died in the war. Thomas had Quinn's temperament, quiet and observant even as a baby. Rose doted on her little brother, and Quinn built a larger cabin to accommodate their growing family. The years passed in a blur of seasons and growth. Rose grew into a smart, curious girl who loved exploring the forests with her father. Thomas developed into a strong boy who seemed to inherit Quinn's natural understanding of the wilderness. In 1879, Helena gave birth to another daughter, Clara, who was sweet and gentle. Their farm prospered. Quinn's hunting skills kept them in meat and pelts to trade. Helena's garden expanded every year, and they began selling produce to the other settlers. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and happy. The love that had sparked on a journey to see the ocean had deepened and matured into something steady and enduring. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1882, Quinn surprised Helena by announcing they were taking a trip. He had arranged for neighbors to watch the children for a week, and he was taking her back to the coast. "Why?" Helena asked, delighted but confused. "Because 10 years ago I took you to see the ocean for the first time," Quinn said, "and I want to go back and remember that moment. I want to stand on that beach with you and thank God for every day since." They made the journey in late summer, following much the same route they had taken a decade earlier. But this time they traveled with the ease of an established couple, finishing each other's sentences and moving in unconscious coordination. They had mapped their lives onto each other, become two parts of a whole. Standing on the beach in Monterey, with the waves rolling in just as they had before, Helena leaned back against Quinn's broad chest and sighed with contentment. "You remember how nervous I was?" she asked. "How uncertain about everything?" Quinn's arms tightened around her. "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met. You had just lost your father, and you agreed to travel across half the country with a stranger. That took courage. I was not brave. I was desperate and hopeful and maybe a little reckless. You were all of those things. And I loved you for it." Quinn turned her in his arms to face him. "Helena, these past 10 years have been the happiest of my life. You took a man who was half wild and alone and gave him a family, a home, a reason to wake up smiling. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Helena corrected. "You showed me I could be strong. You showed me what real love looks like. You took me to see the ocean and then built me a life better than any dream." They kissed as the waves crashed behind them, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful. They returned home to their children and their farm, to the life they had created together. The years continued to pass, bringing more joys and occasional sorrows. They buried friends and welcomed new neighbors. They watched their children grow into capable adults who chose their own paths. Rose married a doctor and moved to San Francisco, giving Quinn and Helena their first grandchildren. Thomas took over the farm, proving to have his father's work ethic and his mother's kindness. Clara married a rancher from the next valley, staying close to home. As Quinn and Helena grew older, they did less of the heavy work and more of the supervising, offering advice to their children and grandchildren. Quinn's hair turned silver, and his face became even more weathered, but his strength remained. Helena developed laugh lines around her eyes and streaks of white in her brown hair, but her spirit stayed youthful. On summer evenings, they would sit on the porch of the cabin Quinn had built decades earlier, watching the sun set over the hills. Quinn would hold Helena's hand, his thumb rubbing across her knuckles in a gesture that had become second nature over 30-plus years of marriage. "You ever regret it?" Helena asked one such evening in 1903. "Giving up your solitary life in the mountains for all this?" Quinn looked at her, and his eyes held all the love of their years together. "Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Helena. You and the life we built. Even with all the noise and chaos, all the people and responsibilities, especially because of those things." Quinn lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I thought I wanted to be alone. I thought I needed the silence. But what I really needed was you. I just did not know it until I saw you standing in that cabin, trying to figure out what came next. I fell in love with you that first day, even if I did not admit it for weeks." Helena smiled. "I fell in love with you on the trail, watching you navigate us through impossible places, watching you protect me and care for me and show me the world. You gave me the ocean, Quinn. But more than that, you gave me a life worth living." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead. Two people who had started as strangers, brought together by grief and dreams, who had somehow found in each other the missing piece that made them whole. Their love story was not one of dramatic gestures or fairy tale perfection. It was built on quiet mornings and shared work, on facing challenges together and celebrating small victories. It was the kind of love that endured because it was rooted in respect and friendship as much as passion. In the spring of 1907, Quinn fell ill. The doctor said his heart was wearing out, that decades of hard living had taken their toll. Quinn accepted this news with the same calm he had faced everything else in life, but Helena refused to accept it. "You are not leaving me," she said fiercely, sitting beside his bed. "We have too much left to do." Quinn smiled weakly and touched her face. "Helena, we have done everything that matters. We loved each other well. We raised good children. We built a home and a legacy. If I go tomorrow, I go a happy man." "Well, I am not ready," Helena said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "So you just have to stay." Quinn did stay, defying the doctor's predictions. He recovered enough to leave his bed, though he never regained his full strength. He walked with a cane now, and his breathing was labored. But he refused to waste the time he had left. He told stories to his grandchildren, passing on the wisdom of his years. He sat with Helena and planned the future of the farm with Thomas. He made sure everyone knew how much he loved them. On an evening in late June, almost exactly 35 years after he had first brought Helena to see the ocean, Quinn asked Thomas to take them back to the coast one more time. It was a difficult journey for him, and Helena protested that it was too much. But Quinn insisted, and Thomas drove them in a wagon fitted with cushions and blankets. They arrived in Monterey on a clear, warm day. Thomas helped his father down to the beach, and Quinn and Helena stood once more before the Pacific. The waves rolled in with the same eternal rhythm, unchanged by the passage of time. "You remember?" Quinn asked, his voice weak but happy. "Every moment," Helena said, her arm supporting his waist. "I remember being so overwhelmed by the beauty of it. And I remember you holding me, making me feel safe enough to be overwhelmed. Best day of my life, until you married me the next morning. Best decision of my life, saying yes when you asked." Quinn turned to look at her, and the love in his eyes was as strong as it had been when he first confessed his feelings in that cave during the storm. "Helena Harper Patterson, you are the great adventure of my life, more than the mountains or the war or anything else. Loving you has been the wildest, most worthwhile journey I ever took. And you are mine," Helena said, crying openly now. "My unexpected blessing, my mountain man who showed me the ocean and then gave me the world." They stood together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Thomas watched from a distance, giving his parents privacy. When the last light faded, Quinn was tired, and Thomas helped them back to the wagon. Quinn Patterson died peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later, with Helena holding his hand and their children gathered around. He was 73 years old and had lived a full, meaningful life. The funeral drew people from all over the county, testament to the respect Quinn had earned over the decades. He was buried on a hill overlooking the valley he had claimed, with a simple headstone that read, "Quinn Patterson, beloved husband, father, and friend, 1834–1907. Helena grieved deeply, but without bitterness." She had had 35 years with a man who loved her completely, who had changed the entire course of her life. That was more than many people ever got. She stayed in the cabin they had built together, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She told them stories about Quinn, about their journey west, about the moment she first saw the ocean. Helena lived another 12 years, remaining sharp and engaged until the end. She died in her sleep in 1919 at the age of 69. Her last words to Thomas, spoken the evening before she passed, were simple. "Tell your father I am coming. Tell him I cannot wait to see him again." They buried her beside Quinn on the hill, and her headstone read, "Helena Harper Patterson, beloved wife, mother, and friend, 1850–1919. Together forever." Their descendants continued to work the farm for generations, passing down the story of the mountain man who took a grieving woman on a journey to show her the ocean and ended up finding love. It became family legend, a reminder that the best things in life often come from unexpected places, and that true love can bloom even in the harshest wilderness if two people are brave enough to reach for it. The cabin Quinn built with his own hands still stood 100 years later, preserved by the family as a monument to where it all began. Visitors could see the original fireplace where Quinn and Helena had warmed themselves on cold nights, the porch where they had watched sunsets, the bedroom where their children had been born. But more than the physical structure, what endured was the love story itself. A woman who had never seen the ocean, a mountain man who took her on a journey just to show her waves, two broken people who found in each other the healing and wholeness they did not even know they needed. Their love had been tested by distance and danger, had grown through the everyday work of building a life together, and had endured even beyond death. On summer evenings, when the light hit the valley just right, some claimed they could see two figures standing on the hill where Quinn and Helena were buried. A tall, broad-shouldered man with long hair and a woman leaning against his chest, both looking out over the land they had tamed together. Whether it was truly their spirits or just a trick of the light and wishful thinking, no one could say for certain, but their great-great-grandchildren, working the same soil Quinn and Helena had first plowed, liked to think it was real. They liked to imagine that love like theirs did not end with death, that two souls so perfectly matched would find each other in whatever came after. And when they told the story to their own children, they always emphasized the same moral: that kindness creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see, that taking chances on people can change everything, and that sometimes the greatest adventures are the ones that lead us home to where we are supposed to be. Quinn Patterson had set out to repay a debt to a dead man by showing his daughter the ocean. Instead, he had found his purpose, his family, and his great love. Helena Harper had agreed to a journey with a stranger because she had nothing left to lose. Instead, she had gained everything worth having. Their story was not one of grand heroics or dramatic rescues, though those moments existed. It was a story of two people choosing each other every day, building a life from nothing but determination and love, and creating a legacy that outlasted them both. The ocean that Quinn had taken Helena to see still rolled its waves against the California shore, eternal and unchanging. But the lives that had been changed by that journey rippled outward through time, affecting dozens, then hundreds of people. Children who carried Quinn's strength and Helena's kindness. A farm that fed communities. A love story that inspired generations to believe in the possibility of finding their person, even in the most unlikely circumstances. And that, in the end, was the real gift Quinn had given Helena. Not just a view of the waves, but a lifetime of love and purpose and belonging. She had stood on that beach at 22, alone and grieving, and imagined she was seeing the most beautiful thing she would ever witness. But she had been wrong. The most beautiful thing was what came after. The years of waking up beside a man who loved her fiercely, the joy of children and grandchildren, the satisfaction of work well done, the peace of a life fully lived. That was the true ocean, vast and deep and endless, full of mysteries and wonders that revealed themselves slowly over time. Quinn had shown her the Pacific, yes. But more importantly, he had shown her that life could be rich and full even after devastating loss, that love could be found in unexpected places, and that sometimes the journey matters just as much as the destination. Their story ended, as all stories must, with death and separation. But it also continued in the lives they had created, the land they had shaped, the love they had modeled for their children. In that way, Quinn and Helena Patterson never really died at all. They lived on in every sunrise over the valley, in every meal shared around the family table, in every decision made with love rather than fear. And on certain summer nights, when the air was still and the stars were bright, their descendants would stand on that hill and feel the presence of something larger than themselves. A love that had started with a mountain man's promise to a grieving woman, that had grown through hardship and joy, and that had ultimately transcended even death itself. That was the legacy of Quinn and Helena Patterson, proof that love, real love, built on respect and partnership and daily choosing each other, could create ripples that extended across generations. Their story began with waves on a distant shore, but it became so much more. It became a foundation, a legend, a promise that even in the hardest times, love could bloom and flourish and create something beautiful that would last long after the lovers themselves had gone.